Spoke to my next guest earlier this week, Daniel Ricciardo, the F1 driver. Of course, their season has been postponed for now due to COVID-19. Daniel has been staying at his parents' farm just outside Perth. Five Live's F1 presenter Jenny Gow joined us for the chat as well. And this is how Daniel said he was coping with lockdown in Australia.
I'm quite fortunate, I guess, this whole situation. I think in general, Australia's been pretty good throughout all this, and been just, I guess, being able to be home and out on the farm. It's been nice because I don't spend enough time here, but it's been perfect for isolation with having so much space and a little bit of freedom as opposed to kind of being locked in a small apartment or something. So I'm pretty lucky.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Mentally, this lockdown could have been very different for you if you'd been stuck in an apartment in Monaco. I mean, I'm sure it's a very nice apartment in Monaco, but if you were stuck somewhere where you didn't have the outdoors that you do on the farm, then that would have been very different for you. Yeah,
you're right. It's I need to kind of get up and move around. I mean, I love watching movies and stuff, but I'm not a real couch potato. I'm certainly an active kid, and I would have struggled in a few other places. So this has been really, I guess, quite nice, to be able to get some time here. And I haven't had this since I left Australia back in 2007. So it's really, really rare for me.
So is that strange?
It is strange, but I think obviously the circumstances right now are strange, so everything's just strange.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good way of looking at it. Let's bring Jenny in. Hello, Jenny.
Hello. Hi, Daniel. You guys seem to be having an absolute blast. Just tell us who you're with and what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I think that as well, I'm quite fortunate. I've got my friend and trainer Michael with me, and Blake as well, who works with me and has become a friend over time. So, it's just us three, and we've been able to really knuckle down and get into, obviously do a bit of work stuff on the side, I guess, and fulfill some, media obligations and whatnot. But I think more importantly, just have the space that we've got out here on the farm and set up a real training program that we never really get. You get it at the start of the year, but then once you get back to Europe and the traveling starts, it's so hard to get any routine and consistency, so you do a few days training, you gain a little bit, but then you travel for a few days. So you kind of go back to square one, and it's small increments where now we've been able to build like a 8-week block, as we'd call it, and starting to see some real good improvements. So it's just nice to have that time. I think the part of it is the training and being able to have had this amount to let's say, condition my body. And I think the icing on the cake of that as well is, we haven't been jumping time zones. We haven't been locked in pressurized cabins, 3 days a week up in the air. And I think the benefit is going to be really, really nice. And because it's so unique, I think it was really important to maximize this. And who knows, it might give me a bit more longevity as well in my career.
Well, I think that's quite interesting just on how you train during the season, because maybe a lot of F1 fans or sports fans in general won't sort of appreciate how your week works. If you have back-to-back races, let's say they're just in Europe, so we'll take out the long-haul travel, but if you have back-to-back races in Europe, how does your week break down from the moment you finish on a Sunday to then starting the following Sunday?
It's a good question, and I guess probably everyone thinks, you get back and Monday you're back in the gym and you're training Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you get to the track and whatever. But back-to-back is a little bit of conservation mode as well. You want to be fresh for obviously both weekends. And so a Monday would look like a rest day, no real strenuous training. Yeah. You might do some stretching or let's say like a yoga type of day. But Tuesday, you might go for a bit of a run and just keep a few things ticking over. But it's really, you're doing like, let's say, a light session on Tuesday, and then you're probably traveling again on Wednesday. So what you think you might have a week or, 4 or 5 days between races, it's actually really, what one day to do something and the other two are either traveling or resting.
We had George Russell on a few weeks ago, and so I'd quite like to take you back to the first time you sat in a Formula One car and then the first time you then got out of the Formula One car, having driven it. And obviously, George made the point, you grow up working with cars and racing cars and so on and so forth. But that first time in an F1 car is very different to anything you've experienced before.
Yeah, I'll give you the emotional feeling and then the physical feeling.
Yes, please. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, the emotional, it's surreal, I think, especially for me coming from Australia and always watching it, from a distance, so to speak, waking up at crazy hours in the morning to watch a race that was typically happening in Europe. So the sport always felt very far away, obviously distance, but also something not being very attainable. But so getting in the car and kind of pulling out of the pits the first time, it was like, wow, like how did I get here? It's actually happening. So it's certainly like a pinch yourself, and with that, because you put it on a pedestal, a kind of flush of nerves come through. Then it's obviously a lot of excitement, and I mean the feeling of putting your foot down and accelerating for the first time in one of these cars. It's intimidating. The acceleration, and there's never really a feeling of the car wanting to slow down. It only slow downs when you brake, but like the rate of acceleration just keeps going and keeps going. It feels kind of infinite. It's certainly intimidating, but you do a few laps and you're like, okay, I want more. So it's addictive. And then the physical side, I mean, after let's say the first day I ever tested, you get out of the car and you're exhausted, but your body just feels like it's done something it's never done before. It's been through something that it's never done. It feels stiff, and even like your internals, everything just feels like shaken up. I don't know. It's kind of like if you jump on a roller coaster, or if you were to do skydiving or do something, your body gets a bit of a hit, a bit of a shock, and it's a similar feeling.
George told me and Jenny as well, Daniel, that the first few times he got out, his eyes were bloodshot as he got used to it.
Yes, that's actually a very good point, and one I will elaborate on. It's the speed of which things happen. It's like flashing images are coming at you so much. Your eyes need adapting. Like your eyes go blurry, and your eyes need to be trained to deal with the speed. And you're flashing past, whether it's trees or tire barriers or just elements on the track. It's like your eyes take time to focus and adjust. So that was also another one. I think that alone is quite mentally draining, because your eyes feel like it's kind of like you've been sitting in front of a computer for a few hours and your eyes just feel heavy and tired. It's a similar feeling.
So given all of that, given this extended break, do you think it will take time for your body to get used to being behind the wheel of an F1 car again?
I think if this was my first, let's say, year or 2 years in F1, if I was still not completely adapted to it, my answer would be yes. I've noticed over time, so winter testing is normally a good reference point. My first few winter testings, in the early part of my career, day one always felt like a bit of a shock to the system again. And the further my career's gone on, the less of a shock that's been. Let's say the body is conditioned enough by now with experience that it will be okay. But I would say like the rookies, the first year, second year guys would feel it a little more.
So Daniel, can you try and predict what that first lap of the first race, let's say it's Austria at the beginning of July, can you predict how that lap's going to go?
Some form of chaos, hopefully in a controlled manner. But I mean, it's when I say chaos, like I just, I'm not really referencing like cars everywhere, but I'm just referencing there's going to be so much, probably a combination of like rust, a combination of emotion, excitement, just eagerness. I mean, everyone's going to be ready to go. So I think you're going to get some guys who perform on that level of, adrenaline, and then others who might not, and that's going to create probably some bold overtakes and maybe some miscalculated ones. So you're going to see a bit of everything, I'm sure.
It always fascinates me whenever I get in a car. And Mark, I don't know if you've ever gone go-karting or been in a fast car, and I can't help myself from sitting in there and always squealing the whole way around. I'm so excited. How, as a driver, how do you control adrenaline?
Oh, Um, yeah,
Or do you?
it's probably it's. I don't know if I've been asked that question, but I guess probably the first thing I think of is breathing. Some breathing techniques and just trying to, because I guess once your adrenaline's up, your heart rate's coming up and you're getting probably more fidgety. So yeah, control the breathing and just try and regulate all that to try and keep a more leveled field of emotions and all that sort of stuff. But a few deep breaths is probably the best way. Otherwise, just, yeah, I don't know.
And you must have to embrace it to a certain point to do what you do. You condition yourself, but surely that adrenaline is what turns Daniel Ricciardo into your nickname, the Honey Badger.
Yeah, you've got to use it to your advantage for sure. And it's like nerves and all this energy you get before a race. You can let it kind of eat you up and make you feel exhausted and heavy, or you eat it up and you use it as fuel and kind of push that adrenaline into your quick decision making and your improved reflex, all these sort of things. So I guess that's the beauty of it. Like we control everything. We control our body and then how our body is able to then control the car. So it's takes time, I guess, to get to that point, but most times you're able to get it right.
So quite a lot of, I suppose, our question comes from wow, to be able to do what you do is frankly remarkable. But then do you look at, I mean, you're good mates with Marcus Stoinis, aren't you? So do you look at Marcus Stoinis facing a man coming in to bowl to him at 90 miles an hour and think, how on earth do you do that?
Yeah, I do, and I guess I'm aware now how all this works, and it's, over time and over practice. It's like F1 now, the speed feels like it's slowed down, because I've trained my body and I guess my brain for so long. So 300 and something kilometers an hour doesn't feel like 300 and something kilometers an hour anymore, and I guess I would not stand in front of a 90 mile an hour cricket ball, not even like if you paid me, no, absolutely. So there is an element for sure. I'm like, you are crazy. But I'm also aware that, you build up to it over time and, you get your eye in for that. So, I completely respect it.
Would you face Marcus?
I did as a kid many times with a tennis ball, not even a cricket ball, a tennis ball. And I was already quite intimidated and we were probably 13, 14 years old. So no, I would not.
You couldn't have gone down the cricket route then?
No, like I loved some backyard cricket. I certainly did. I love all ball sports. Like I do like, hand-eye coordination and all the skills that are involved around that. But yeah, like cricket balls are hard and getting hit with one, no, I'm good. Put me in the outfield maybe for a kind of big catch, but I don't want to be the batter.
Bearing in mind you started karting so young, did you do other sports? I mean, did you do Aussie rules, or did you do rugby league, or did you do? I mean, you said you did a bit of cricket, but did karting take everything else over?
It eventually did, but I was definitely juggling a few sports. So the first sport I started to play as a kid was Aussie rules football. So I did that for, I would say, a couple years.
That's a ridiculous game, isn't it? Isn't it? That, I mean, be honest with me, Daniel. That is a ridiculous game.
It's a beautiful game, but yeah, I was about to be very I was about to be very honest with you and say, I wasn't tough enough for it. I wasn't willing to put my body on the line. I realized that from a young age, so I felt like I had good kicking and marking skills. A mark, I guess that's a catch to a lot of people, but I wasn't willing to put my body on the line, and I was quite a skinny, scrawny kid, so yeah, I was quite intimidated. So then I went to do soccer for a few years and tennis. So I was kind of juggling soccer, tennis, and go-karting, and then at some point, my parents were like, "You're taking up all of our time. You have to pick. You have to decide what you want to do." And
so you picked the most
go-karting
expensive sport possible.
Yeah, my parents hated me for that.
They supported you through a heck of a lot, haven't they, Daniel? I mean, they travel with you still a lot of the time. It's not easy doing that when you're based in Australia. The commitment they've shown to you, you've given them a reward, but my word, they've really stood by you, haven't they, all these years?
Yeah, absolutely. And you only realize that, kind of the older you get in life, and I can now put myself in their shoes, and I'm like, oh, if I had a kid, like, would I have let him done all those things and moved away? And it's pretty crazy, the level of trust as well that they had in me. But I guess they're not the only parents that do it. Many do, and it's nice to have that with your mum and dad. And I mean, I'm sure I make them stress out a lot, but yeah, it's I think moments like Monaco in 2018, like them being there for that, that was enough. Like that was everything that we could have ever have hoped for, to kind of repay them back.
I was on the floater home, the Red Bull floater home, which is an incredible structure in Monaco, watching you win that race. And I have to say, your parents did not look cool, calm and collected through that. I think they were more stressed than you.
I mean, I believe it because I know my mum pretty well, but I've heard she's an interesting character whilst I'm out on the racetrack. Let's say that much.
You can elaborate. Feel free.
A nervous wreck is putting it nicely. Yeah, it's a tough one, and I've always respected my dad a lot for not getting involved. He came from a racing background. He loved it, and it's his passion as much as it is mine. But he knew where to draw the line for him, and to stop getting involved. So he knew when it was time to leave it to the professionals, so to speak. So he never really pushed or insisted or made it awkward for me coming up through the ranks. And he applied pressure because he wanted me to do well and he believed I could, but he never let that carry on to anything more emotional. I was quite lucky that he understood that.
Well, that's exactly it, Daniel, isn't it? You are lucky there. It's not only leaving it to the professionals from a parent's point of view, it's also leaving it to the child as well, and that fine balance between encouraging and wanting them to do better, but actually letting them find their own path with it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, if it was a sport that he had no idea about, then I know that would be normal. But yeah, because he, I feel, knew so much about it and still decided to step away. I'm sure it would have been hard at times. I'm sure he would have wanted to come into the room and say, "What's going on? What were you doing? Or what are the team doing? What's going on here?" But yeah, he always just knew his place, and I'm sure he had to hold himself back at times, but he always did. So it made it a bit easier for me to kind of feel at home with the team. And yeah, just you've already got enough pressure on yourself. So to have additional from like your dad, for example, I could imagine how much harder that would be.
Have you ever set yourself targets, or is it what will be will be?
I definitely set myself targets. Yeah, in terms of from a racing point of view, absolutely. I mean, my basic target here with this whole journey and getting into F1 was not just to get into F1. It was to leave here a world champion. And was I excited to make it to F1? Absolutely. And do I love it? Yes. I haven't got there yet, but am I still enjoying it? Absolutely. But if it ended today, would I be disappointed? A big part of me would be, because it's something I really believe I'm good enough to achieve. So I would feel like it's kind of left something on the table. So that's really the ultimate goal. And I think the day I stop believing, I'm able to get that anymore is then, the day you'll probably see me walk away from the sport. But yeah, I certainly still believe that this can happen.
So much of this is about positioning, isn't it? We look back at some of the greats in F1 and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Are you positioning yourself to be in the right place at the right time? Because I don't think there's a single F1 fan who doesn't believe you could be world champion, but you've got to have the right car behind you at the right time.
Yeah, the right time would have been 10 years ago. The younger the better, for sure. Hopefully the right time's not when I'm 45, but yeah, it's...
Nothing wrong with being mid-40s, Daniel. Let me tell you that. I'm having to tell a few people this on the Saturday afternoon. Mid-40s is absolutely fine.
I'll take your word. I mean, if I've still got the belief by then, or till then, I mean, you might still see me here. But it's one of those ones with a sport where, it's frustrating that the sport is kind of driven, quite a lot by that, being in the right equipment in the right season. But, it's what I signed up for. I'm aware of it. And that's in itself an exciting part of the sport. The challenge is to try and position yourself with the best team at that moment. And, when rule changes come in, it's like, okay, is that still the team to be with, or are we missing something? Do we need to try and build what we got here? And it's kind of like chess a lot of the time. And, don't get me wrong, I wish it was just black and white and, everyone had the same and we could just go and really see who was the best. But that's not how it works. But in saying that, I do feel like the best will always find a way to make it and rise to the top.
Just before we let you go, I was looking at your Twitter account, and I'm just wondering how many of the words have your Renault F1 team were trying to teach you in French a week ago. I'm just wondering how many of those have managed to stick in your mind.
Not many. They
I wouldn't do that to you.
Ones.
Don't worry.
I remember tire. That was, I think, le pneu.
Yeah, very good. Yeah,
there was some long ones, and I normally back myself with pronunciation, but I was stumped by many of them. So, yeah, they got me good, and I respect them for going hard on me.
They picked some of the hardest French words to pronounce that there are, really. So they did you good and proper, really.
They gave it a nudge. It's probably the competitor in me. I'm always willing to give something a go.
Can you remember the French for Oopsie Daisy to finish?
Oh, pop. It was something pop.
Sapelli Popette.
Sapelli Popette. Yes.
Who'd have thought we'd ever finish an interview with Daniel Ricciardo on the French for Oopsie Daisy? It's been a joy to talk to you. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Stay safe. We'll see you soon.
Jenny Gow and Daniel Ricciardo with me. We recorded that yesterday. Thank you very much for all your texts and tweets. 85058 at 5.